Hi, my name is Alicia Young, and I would like to share with you a presentation on the case study, Internet Use Violations, Threats Over the World Wide Web. So in this particular case, we have a teacher who has been made aware of a Facebook page where she is being criticized. The comments are really damaging to her reputation, and she feels threatened. So let's take a look at what we know about this particular problem. Number one, we know that Ms. Tate received an email with a link to a Facebook page about her with highly suggestive comments, offensive language. She is being criticized in her instruction, and she also feels like she's been threatened. The second thing we know about this is that the parents and the students have been complaining a lot to the principal about the workload, poor instruction, and high levels of stress in Ms. Tate's class. And number three, we know that the principal is highly respected by the parents and the community and has won awards. He has also suggested techniques to Mrs. Tate to help reduce the stress of her students and improve the relationships she has with her students. However, at this time, she has not been able to implement those suggestions successfully. And so what do we want to know about the problem? What I would like to know is, what is the school policy on cyberbullying? Number two, I would like to know, can the technology specialist in the district identify where the email came from or who sent it? And number three, did the student that Mrs. Tate accused of causing trouble and having high technology skills needed to do this, did they have anything to do with setting up this particular Facebook page? So the problem number one is that Mrs. Tate is being cyberbullied on a Facebook page. Number two, an anonymous person has actually committed libel and actual malice against this new and unpopular teacher, Mrs. Tate. And number three, Mrs. Tate feels that her life has been threatened and that she is not safe at school or at her home. So let's take a look at a plan. The first step of my plan would to be have the Facebook page removed. So strategies would include, number one, contact the superintendent to explain the current situation. Number two, communicate with the police about this being a potential threat. And number three, report the Facebook post to Facebook to see if they can have it taken down. Number two, step two would be to complete the investigation. So three strategies that I would do in this, in order to complete the investigation would be to, number one, look at the Facebook comments for clues as to who may be involved. Number two, I would want to question the student William about his possible involvement. And number three, I would question a lot of students, many of the students in the class, or if there were folks that had posted on the Facebook page, question those students as well about their knowledge in this particular matter. And step three, I would provide an opportunity for education for everybody. Number one, I would educate my students on cyberbullying and the consequences. Number two, provide resources to parents on cyberbullying and the consequences. And step three, or my third strategy, would be to implement a process or procedure to report bullying. So in resolving this issue and thinking about what's best for students, number one, establishing expectations and consequences based on district policy on bullying and cyberbullying for students, parents, and teachers is really important. Number two, what's best for students is to really advocate for that victim and protect them from further abuse. And number three, following the law is what's best for students. So when we think about the problem, and when I was reading the problem, in reflection, some of the things that I was thinking, number one was the principal is being respectful really to all the parties involved, and it seems that he's calm in moving forward. So I suspect that he doesn't want to act in haste and is mindful of his reputation with the parents in the community. The consequences for cyberbullying are severe, and that's probably why he mentions to Ms. Tate that it could be a prank. I'm also thinking that, number two, Ms. Tate is inferring that this particular comment is a death threat. She may be reading more into the comment than was actually written. The comment did ask who wants Mrs. Tate to disappear. So it could mean anything. It could mean that they just don't want her to be the teacher anymore. They want her to move to a new school. or just they don't want to be in her class. So I'm also thinking number 3 is, on one hand, the principal responded to her call on a Sunday afternoon. He was calm and he was thoughtful and made plans for next steps. But on the other hand, he tried to calm her by saying that it was probably just a prank, which seems inappropriate for a case of cyberbullying. So what was I feeling during the resolving this particular issue? Number 1, I was really feeling bad because the teacher assumes that it is a particular student named William and that he may or may not actually know anything about this incident. It seems like a rush to judgment to accuse him at this point until an investigation has begun. I'm also feeling bad that she is a first-year teacher and that she is doing what she thinks is best for the students to prepare them for rigorous subjects. It seems like she has a knowledge and experience to know that her high expectations will benefit those students and help support them as they continue in higher education. However, the students and the parents really are not feeling that way, and they are just complaining, so perhaps they're not seeing the whole picture. Number 3, as far as what I'm feeling bad that she feels like her life has been threatened and that she doesn't feel safe. She doesn't even feel safe in her home and wants to go stay with her mother. And all of this because she was doing what she thought was best for her students. Some things that I value that are important in this particular problem are, number 1, I value a safe learning environment. That includes the feeling of being safe and secure for students and teachers. I value the relationship that the principal has with these parents and with the community. And I also value educational opportunities. I value having curriculum and a plan for teaching students as well as teachers and parents about cyberbullying, the severity of participating in this particular activity, and the consequences. So some things that I feel like are unresolved at this point and will need attention. Number 1, Mrs. Tate's instructional practices and the fact that she's struggling with the guidance and suggestions that are being offered to her as a new teacher. She seems to need more support in implementing some new strategies and needs some suggestions. So I feel like that's something that is going to need to be continued to be addressed. As well as, I feel another thing unresolved were the students or parents that commented on the Facebook post to support this particular negative attack. I'm wondering what are their consequences? So is there a policy or procedure to follow if a student or a teacher is being bullied by a group of students? So I'm feeling like this is probably unresolved, that there are more students involved in this than just one. And then I'm also feeling what's unresolved is that William seems to be a behavior problem in class and that this needs to be addressed. So what are some ways to manage this inappropriate behavior? If this has escalated to the point of harassment and cyberbullying, it's definitely out of control. But even if it wasn't him, it's still a behavior issue that probably is an unresolved issue that needs to be addressed. So for me, as the leader of the building, when I think about supporting my students as success for all and by acting with integrity, number 1, I would conduct an investigation that keeps all the conversations confidential. I would want all students and staff to know that this information is private and confidential. Number 2, implement consequences and not ignore the severity of the situation by calling it a prank. And thirdly, by acting with integrity, I would not play favoritism to certain students or parents in the process of investigating or when implementing the consequences. So I feel like all of those are things that I would do in acting with integrity to support success for my students. So in thinking about acting with fairness for my students and what's best for them, number 1, as part of the investigation, I would absolutely include William. However, I would not single William out as the first person to interview. I would interview multiple students from the classes. It seems unfair to jump to the conclusion that it might be William. And then number 2, in fairness, I think that this is an opportunity to educate parents on what kinds of conversations to have with their students about bullying and direct them to some resources about cyberbullying and the consequences. And number 3, as the leader, I would continue to privately coach the teacher. So in fairness to her, she needs support in her practice and defining her craft, and in order to keep her expectations high, but also meet the needs of her students. And then the third component, really acting in an ethical manner and keeping my students' needs in mind. I would follow the board policy and the law to protect the teachers and the students, as they have the right to be educated and to live in a fear-free environment. Number 2, I would educate students on bullying and cyberbullying so that students understand the severity and the consequences, as well as know what to do if they or someone they know is being bullied. And then number 3, ethically, it's going to be very important to contact the superintendent immediately and make him aware of the situation and to seek guidance, as well as follow up with the next steps and update him on the situation as appropriate. And that concludes my resolution to this particular case study. Thank you.